Shows you what a good actor I am, because I really am the sweetest.
Come on.
He could have walked away clean. He could have accepted freedom with conditions, played by the rules, and lived quietly. But Burt Lancaster was never built that way. He was a man forged by independence, pride, and an unbreakable moral code. To him, freedom meant real freedom. No leash, no quiet obedience, no silent compromises. He believed he had already paid his debt to society. And from that moment on, he answered to no one. And that same uncompromising spirit would one day push him to do something that still sends chills through Hollywood history. Because Burt Lancaster was not just another movie star. He was the conscience of Hollywood's golden age, a towering presence whose performances in Atlantic City and Elmer Gantry made him a symbol of raw truth, integrity, and fearless honesty. On screen, he embodied justice. Off screen, he demanded it. But what if everything you thought you knew about him was only half the story? Hidden away from public eyes, locked in silence for decades, was a private notebook Burt Lancaster never intended the world to see. A notebook where he wrote not praise, but judgment. Names, accusations, dark truths about Hollywood's most celebrated icons. People the public adored. Legends whose reputations were built on glamour, charm, and carefully crafted myths. Inside those pages, Burt Lancaster exposed the stars he believed were the most evil of Hollywood's golden age, not because of rumors, not because of gossip, but because he had seen them up close, because he had watched cruelty hide behind smiles, power crush careers, and manipulation masquerade as talent. These weren't whispers passed in the studio hallways. These were accusations powerful enough to destroy legacies forever. So the question is unavoidable. Were these the cold, hard truths from a man who had seen Hollywood's soul stripped bare? Or were they the bitter confessions of a legend haunted by grudges he could never let go? Either way, the list he left behind is explosive. And the very first name written at the top shocked even those who thought they knew Hollywood inside and out. Because the man Burt Lancaster feared most was another titan of the screen. At the very top of Burt Lancaster's secret notebook, written with unmistakable certainty, sat a name that made even seasoned Hollywood insiders uneasy. Kirk Douglas. Not a rival, not a difficult co-star, but a single chilling word scribbled beside his name. Predator. Hollywood worshipped Kirk Douglas. His burning intensity, razor-sharp charisma, and unstoppable ambition made him one of the most powerful men of the golden age. To the public, he was fearless, magnetic, a force of nature. But to Burt Lancaster, Douglas represented something far darker. Burt believed Kirk didn't just want success. He needed control, absolute control, and he was willing to intimidate, manipulate, and quietly destroy anyone who stood in his way. Their tension began simmering in the late 1950s, when Burt noticed something others chose not to see. Douglas wasn't just acting in films, he was pulling strings behind studio doors, whispering to producers, influencing casting decisions, quietly deciding not only which projects moved forward, but which people survived in Hollywood. One incident burned itself into Burt Lancaster's memory and never left. A young actress, a major 1959 project, suddenly removed without explanation. In his notebook, Burt wrote 4 words that carry a devastating weight. She said no. To Burt, this wasn't gossip, it wasn't rumor, it was a direct accusation, proof that Kirk Douglas didn't merely chase power, he enforced it, and anyone who resisted vanished. From that moment on, whatever respect Burt once had turned into something colder, sharper, almost visceral. Their rivalry reached its boiling point on the set of Gunfight at the OK Corral. What should have been a professional collaboration turned into a battlefield. Douglas constantly interfered, whispering to producers, swapping out actors he didn't like, demanding endless reshoots not for the film's sake, but to steal more screen time for himself. Burt tried to keep it private, tried to handle it behind closed doors, until one confrontation ended any chance of peace. When Burt finally confronted him, Kirk Douglas didn't deny a thing. He smirked and said a sentence Burt would never forget. "This town rewards men who take what they want." That single line confirmed everything. The arrogance, the hunger, the complete absence of remorse. From that day on, their feud was no secret. Hollywood insiders knew these men weren't just competitors. They were enemies locked in a silent war beneath the spotlight. Douglas refused joint interviews. Burt avoided rehearsals if Kirk was present. At glittering studio dinners, they sat at opposite ends of the room, like rival kings guarding hostile kingdoms. One executive later admitted that if both were invited to the same event, one of them would always cancel. That's how deep the hatred ran, and time changed nothing. By the late 1980s, forgiveness still hadn't come. Burt Lancaster skipped every honorary event celebrating Kirk Douglas. Douglas, in return, erased Burt's name entirely from his memoirs. That silence spoke louder than any argument ever could. But Kirk Douglas was only the first name. The next name on Burt Lancaster's list shocked Hollywood for an entirely different reason, because it belonged to the most powerful woman of her era. The second name in Burt Lancaster's notebook wasn't a man known for brute force or backroom intimidation. It was a woman, a legend, a queen so powerful that Hollywood itself seemed to bend around her moods. Elizabeth Taylor. To the world, Elizabeth Taylor was unstoppable, a goddess of glamour, a face that could freeze time, a star so bright it felt dangerous to look at her too long. Drama followed her, yes, but the public treated that drama like part of her magic. Burt Lancaster didn't see magic, he saw destruction. And what stunned people most wasn't that he disliked her. It was how intensely he believed she represented the most poisonous kind of power Hollywood could produce. The kind that didn't need fists because it had something stronger: fear, control, and a room full of people too terrified to say no. The breaking point, Burt claimed, came in 1962, during the disaster-plagued shoot of Cleopatra, a production so chaotic it already felt cursed. And then one moment happened in front of hundreds of crew members that, to Burt, summed up Elizabeth Taylor perfectly. Taylor walked onto set and immediately spotted another actress wearing a gown that looked a little too similar to hers. And that was it. She exploded. Not a quiet complaint, not a polite request. A full-scale eruption so intense that filming was shut down for nearly half a day. Crew members stood frozen. Assistants scrambled like soldiers under fire. Nobody dared step in. Later, Burt summed it up with cold clarity. She didn't throw tantrums. She declared war. To him, the set wasn't a workplace. It was her battlefield, and everyone else was just collateral. He watched her hold up entire scenes for hours, skip fittings without warning, vanish suddenly, leaving everyone stranded, sweating, terrified, and powerless. Veteran directors who had commanded armies of crew members became nervous and obedient around her. Assistants lowered their voices when she walked by, like one wrong breath could set off another blast, and Burt couldn't stand it. What truly turned him against her, though, wasn't just the chaos, it was what he believed she did to the people around her, especially during her explosive years with Richard Burton. Burt believed Taylor didn't simply influence Burton, she controlled him. He wrote that the scripts were tossed aside before Burton even saw them. Co-stars mysteriously vanished from productions whenever Taylor felt threatened by their chemistry. Careers shifted overnight, not because of talent or logic, but because Elizabeth Taylor felt like it. One casting director even remembered a moment that still sounded unreal. Taylor flipped through a call sheet, pointed at a name, and said, "Not him. I don't like his face." And within hours, that actor was gone. Fired. No explanation. To Burt Lancaster, that was the final straw, because in his eyes, it proved something terrifying. Elizabeth Taylor didn't rule Hollywood through craft or teamwork. She ruled through manipulation and spectacle, through the unspoken threat that if she didn't like you, you didn't exist. And decades later, even when her name came up casually in interviews, Burt's tone would change instantly. Sharp, cold, heavy with old resentment. No reunion, no forgiveness, no mellowing with time. Just Burt Lancaster's unshakable belief that Elizabeth Taylor represented a destructive power he could never accept. But then came the third name, a woman the world still calls fragile, a tragic icon, a victim of Hollywood. Burt Lancaster didn't buy that story for a second. The third name in Burt Lancaster's notebook was one the world had already wrapped in sympathy, tragedy, and eternal devotion. Marilyn Monroe. To millions, Marilyn Monroe was fragile, misunderstood, a wounded soul crushed by fame and expectation. But Burt Lancaster didn't see a victim. He saw calculation. He believed Marilyn knew exactly what she was doing. She understood the power she held over a room, and she used it with precision. Soft voice, downcast eyes, innocent confusion. To Burt, it wasn't weakness, it was leverage. One day on set, Monroe arrived 3 hours late. No apology, no urgency. She looked around at her co-stars and calmly said she wasn't ready to work because the energy felt wrong. That single moment crystallized Burt's opinion forever. He didn't see artistry, he saw entitlement. Her beauty was undeniable, her screen presence unmatched. But to Burt, her chaos was unforgivable. And the moment that locked his resentment in place came during the stormy filming of Some Like It Hot in 1959. The set was buzzing, lights blazing, crew members sweating under unforgiving heat, hundreds of people ready to work. But Marilyn was gone. No warning, no message, no explanation. Minutes turned into hours. Over 100 people stood around waiting, watching daylight slip away and costs skyrocket. And then, as if nothing had happened, Marilyn Monroe reappeared, calm, smiling, completely unapologetic, as if the world had been waiting for her. And then she demanded rewrites for a scene that hadn't even been filmed yet. Later, Burt wrote a line that revealed everything about how he saw her. Delay was her weapon. Confusion was her shield. To him, professionalism meant discipline, and Marilyn shattered that code every time she stepped onto a set. Entire storylines were rewritten overnight because she doubted a line or feared another actress might steal focus. Productions bent, directors surrendered, crew members learned to walk on eggshells. And the most unsettling part, Marilyn knew it. Behind the scenes, Burt believed her charm hardened into something far more calculated. She maintained quiet ties with powerful studio executives. When she wanted someone gone, it simply happened. an actor she disliked would suddenly be labeled difficult and quietly removed without explanation. To Burt Lancaster, this wasn't Hollywood politics. It was career assassination done in silence. One insider once said something that haunted him. If she frowned, someone lost their job. While the world later crowned Marilyn Monroe a tragic icon, a broken beauty who never found peace, Burt refused to accept that narrative. He believed Hollywood protected her chaos with sympathy, while everyone else paid the price in time, money, and emotional damage. To him, Marilyn Monroe's legacy wasn't just glitter and heartbreak. It was collateral damage dressed in glamour. And yet even that wasn't the darkest name on his list. Because next came a man whose cruelty wasn't hidden behind charm or fragility. It was fueled by fear. The fourth name in Burt Lancaster's notebook didn't come with glamour, chaos, or seductive charm. It came with fear, the kind of fear that makes people whisper instead of speak. Spencer Tracy. Burt wrote that people didn't lower their voices around Spencer Tracy out of respect. They did it because they were scared. To him, Tracy wasn't a legend. He was a tyrant wrapped in prestige, a man who treated cruelty like a craft, who could poison a room without raising his voice, because everyone already knew what he was capable of. Burt had worked with difficult personalities before. He had seen egos, tantrums, and arrogance. But what he couldn't tolerate was watching powerful men mistreat the people who had no protection. And according to Burt, Spencer Tracy did exactly that. The moment that sealed Burt's disgust was small, almost invisible to the world, but unforgettable to him. One afternoon, Burt noticed a young makeup artist trembling the second Tracy walked in. Her hands shook so badly she couldn't finish her work. She looked like someone standing in front of a firing squad. Burt quietly asked her what was wrong, and she whispered the reason, barely able to say it out loud. He threw a chair at the last girl. No apology, no remorse. Tracy didn't even blink, as if it were nothing, as if it were routine. And to Burt Lancaster, that was the most unforgivable part. Not just violence, but how normal it was for Spencer Tracy. So normal that he didn't even remember doing it. Burt saw that as a form of a cruelty beyond anger. It wasn't a rare explosion, it was a habit, a system, a way of ruling through intimidation. And then, during the filming of Judgment at Nuremberg, Burt believed Tracy's temper crossed into something even darker. His rage didn't come with warning. It arrived cold and sharp, always aimed at the weakest person in the room. Burt wrote that Tracy would corner younger actors, forcing them to repeat lines again and again until they cracked under pressure. One exhausted performer confessed something to Burt that sounded like pure psychological torture. He doesn't want the scene to work. He wants me to break. That single confession lit a fire of contempt inside Burt, because it meant Tracy wasn't simply demanding excellence, he was feeding on fear. But Burt claimed it didn't stop there. What disgusted him even more than Tracy's outbursts was the manipulation that followed. When someone dared resist, Tracy would flip instantly. Tears, threats to quit, dramatic speeches about how nobody understood his process. Burt saw it as psychological warfare disguised as artistry. Directors caved, producers begged him to stay, and the rest of the cast held their breath, waiting for the next explosion. Burt wrote in his journal, he punished resistance and rewarded fear. An offset, the hostility didn't fade. Tracy refused to greet Burt in public, At guild meetings, Burt returned the disrespect by refusing to honor Tracy during tributes. Their hostility wasn't quiet, it was permanent. To Burt Lancaster, Spencer Tracy wasn't a tortured genius, he was a tyrant whose presence poisoned every room he entered. And then came the fifth name, not a tyrant, not a predator, not a queen, but someone Burt believed was even worse in a different way, a man who laughed when other people broke. The fifth and final name on Burt Lancaster's secret list didn't come with the reputation of a predator or a tyrant. It came with laughter, the kind of laughter that sounds harmless, until you realize it's being used like a knife. Mickey Rooney. Burt believed the quickest way to understand why he loathed Mickey Rooney was simple. Mickey didn't just make jokes, he enjoyed watching people crumble. Burt had dealt with egos, chaos, even violence. But cruelty disguised as comedy, he considered it a sin he could never forgive. And he believed Rooney didn't hide it. He performed it. Behind closed doors or out in the open, it didn't matter. Burt wrote that Rooney mocked people proudly again and again, like humiliation was part of the show and everyone else was forced to play along. The moment that lit the fuse between them, according to Burt, happened at MGM in the late 1960s. Burt walked into a soundstage expecting a meeting. Instead, he stepped into a scene that he said haunted him forever. There was Rooney in the center of the set, laughing as he mimicked a background actor's stutter. Not playful teasing, not friendly banter. A full, exaggerated imitation meant to make the entire room laugh at someone who couldn't fight back. Crew members looked away in shame. No one dared to stop him. The young actor's face burned red. Then he finally broke and walked off set in tears. Rooney smirked and yelled after him, "If you can't take a joke, you shouldn't be in this business." Most people stayed silent, pretended it was normal, just another Mickey moment. But Burt Lancaster saw something uglier. Cruelty dressed as entertainment, and Burt believed it wasn't rare. He wrote that Rooney targeted the most vulnerable people, women assistants, stand-ins, young actors who were still trying to find their footing. One script supervisor once told Burt something that sounded like survival advice. You pray he doesn't notice you. If he does, you're done for the day. And to Burt, that said everything. He didn't see a comedian. He saw a man who fed on power imbalance, someone who used laughter as a shield so nobody could accuse him without being told they were too sensitive. Burt also believed Rooney's cruelty didn't stop on set. His personal life, in Burt's eyes, reflected the same chaos. Marriages filled with emotional manipulation, mood swings, explosive confrontations, but what infuriated Burt most was how Hollywood brushed it off with a shrug. That's just Mickey being Mickey. As if fame could excuse cruelty. Their feud reached its peak at a charity gala in the 1970s. Rooney decided to humiliate Burt Lancaster in front of a full audience, mocking his serious acting style and calling him the man who forgot how to smile. The room laughed. And that was the moment Burt's patience snapped. He didn't laugh along, he didn't smile. He hit Mickey Rooney with a cold, unflinching stare that froze the entire table. The laughter died. The air turned heavy. No one dared make eye contact. From that night on, Burt Lancaster made one thing clear. He would never share a stage, an interview, or even a camera frame with Mickey Rooney again. Whenever producers tried to pair them for publicity, Burt's answer never changed. I don't work with men who hurt people for sport. No reconciliation, no handshake, no mellowing with time. Insiders claimed that even decades later, when Mickey Rooney's name came up, Burt's expression hardened instantly, like the memory still tasted bitter. And that brings us back to the notebook. 5 names, 5 accusations, 5 legacies Burt Lancaster believed were built on darkness the public never wanted to see. So now the real question is yours. Which name from Burt Lancaster's secret list shocked you the most? And do you believe these stars were truly as dark as he claimed? Or were they victims of Hollywood's endless web of power games, grudges, and rumor?